allowed us to do through the power of your Holy Spirit. But we thank you for the opportunity that we have to come together to discuss ways in which we might contribute to finishing your work. We pray that your Holy Spirit will be in our midst and that these sessions will be valuable, not only to us, but for those who have not heard your word, for those who are waiting to hear a message from you. Forgive us for our sins and help us to remain faithful even unto death. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Charles Dickens, the very famous book, Tale of Two Cities. When we look at the first line, it gives us an indication of where we are. It says it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And it appears that we are living in such times. It's very easy to point out the worst of times, that is. Economic crisis, unemployment at incredible levels, young people who have apparently lost their minds. Things are happening that we know, and we look in Matthew 24 and we start to identify those things. And it gives us a sense that something is about to happen or something is happening. But that's not the problem within the believers, Adventists. It's not agreeing that we're in tremendous times. The issue, and what I want to spend the first session sort of addressing, the issue is, what are we prepared to do about it? What are we personally willing to do faced with the conditions we're in? If, I think it was Pastor Hush last night, was talking about what do you do in a crisis. As the young lady who was anticipating the tsunami, she went out yelling at the top of her voice. Well, that's what we're talking about with extreme missions. Over the years, as a church, we have identified problems. We've identified opportunities. We know what our call is, generally speaking. If you've been around this message for any length of time, you've heard at least one time or another in different ways what we are supposed to be doing. And we talk about it. As a matter of fact, I remember when I first joined this message when I was 17, this bizarre notion of running to caves and packing up everything and living off the land and I remember the very first, and these were bizarre. Growing up in New Orleans in the inner city, coming into the church was a strange thing, because that first Sabbath afternoon, here I am, 17, cool and all this stuff, and they said, stand up and we're going to sing Father Abraham. And I said, this is crazy. But then at that same AY, they were talking about what would you do if somebody came in with a gun and said, I'm going to shoot you if you don't keep this up. All of those things we go through, and we understand in a certain sense that we're coming to just incredible times. But the question is, what are we prepared to do about them? How close do you really believe we are to the second coming of Jesus? And in the end, that's going to be the question that we'll all have to answer. And when we answer, yes, I believe Jesus is coming soon, it's going to take a bit more than that. Because if our actions are not following or in tune with that profession of belief, then there's a dichotomy there that you're going to have to come to grips with. You're going to have to settle that thing, or what will happen is you will find yourself drifting away. It's said that character is not developed in a time of crisis. Character is revealed in that time of crisis. For us to think that when the end comes, when the final crisis comes, that all of a sudden we're going to detach ourselves from homes and cars and jobs and families and comforts. That's not going to happen. Now is the time to develop that attitude and start detaching ourselves from the things of the world. Because when the crisis comes, that is not the time to try and figure out and ponder yes or no. There's too much is going to be happening. So when we deal with this notion, this idea of extreme missions, I want to do it in the framework of extreme times in which we're living. Some time ago, when we talk about extreme missions, and we've put out videos on radical missions and all these things, it gave the general church or the mainstream church, however we want to define that large group that's in the middle, it gave them this idea of, whoa, these guys are fanatics. These folk are talking some bizarre stuff. What do you mean, sell everything and move to the jungle? And I experienced it, and we'll talk a little bit later about how I ended up here. But now I think certainly the people are believing that we are truly in extreme times, that we are in incredibly perilous times, and in order for us to deal with the times in which we're living, we have to do some extreme things, some extraordinary things. So when we talk about extreme missions, and I'm going to challenge you in the next few hours or however much time we have, hopefully I want to establish that the stuff that I'm talking about is not so far-fetched in relation to the times in which we're living. You hear it more so than I do, and the statistics on unemployment in the States, foreclosures. I was talking to some former colleagues of mine, how people not only are their houses are being foreclosed on, but they're walking away from their homes without even enough money to move the furniture out. They're just leaving everything. They have absolutely nothing. The thing is just, it's very dramatic. So we have these conditions. Let me take you, that is just I have a couple of pictures here that I want to show you before we really get into the presentation. This is down in Guyana, one of our first little volunteers. Mission, that's Charlotte there, one of the young ladies that you may know, doing some Bible studies in another interior village. This is how we typically cook, with firewood where we are. We've upgraded a bit. We're building a fireside. But the idea of these first few pictures, here we are in the bush, cutting down a tree to carve out a dugout for travel up and down the river. I was teaching my math class one day, and all my boys ran out of my class, and I wondered what happened. And this anteater ran across the front of the campus, and these things are pretty vicious. And when I go out to see where my students are, these young men had roped the thing. I'm like, are you guys mad? And one of my students said, no, sir, you don't understand. We could sell this thing to the guy who exports reptiles, and we could get, 1,000 Guyana dollars, which is about $5 US. So here these young men decided to go head-to-head with this big anteater for $5. Extreme missions, we're talking about what are we prepared to do? Now, this is just washing clothes in the river here. Here we go. Let's get into it. Let's open our Bibles to 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 9. To identify where we are supposed to be going, we first want to establish who we are, who we really are. And it's been said, and I think that the speakers are right on time, it's more than just having your name on the books, on the roll. You probably haven't done anything that warrants disfellowship or things like that. So I'm not just talking about which church you belong to, but truly who we are. Will somebody read it, please? 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 9. It's familiar.
For you are a chosen generation, royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light.
Okay. Now, this idea of a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, we want to spend, thank you, a chosen generation, a royal priesthood. This notion of being a part of this royal priesthood goes back to the sanctuary. It goes back to the time of Aaron in Exodus chapter 25. Go to Exodus chapter 25, and I want to spend a little time on that. Exodus chapter 25, and I believe starting at verse 35. This royal priesthood, now we claim to be this chosen generation and this royal priesthood. To understand fully what this royal priesthood is all about, we have to go back to the Old Testament sanctuary. And when God had instituted that system to explain to us the plan of salvation in as simpler form as he possibly could, he outfitted Aaron with garments that were incredible, spectacular. And Moses, as Moses instructed the folk on what these garments should look like, in Exodus chapter 25, starting at verse 35, the Bible says, "And it shall be upon Aaron to minister, and his sound shall be heard when he goeth in unto the holy place before the Lord, and when he cometh out, that he die not." In verse 36, "And thou shalt make a plate of pure gold, and grave upon it like the engravings of a signet." And this is, what does the Bible say? Holiness to the Lord. Holiness to the Lord. And thou, verse 37. I'm sorry, are you guys with me?
28.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, 28. I'm so sorry. Exodus chapter 28. What did I say? 28. Oh, y'all have to speak up. Now, this is not church. Let me stop. And please, you can stop at any time, because we want to create a give and take, a dialogue here. Please feel free. Oh, you have two. Okay, they gave me one, but that's good. I'll take another one. Yeah. Okay. All right, let me read it again, because I was wondering why you look so baffled. All right. Verse 35, "And it shall be upon Aaron to minister, and his sound shall be heard when he goeth in unto the holy place before the Lord, and when he cometh out, that he die not." In verse 36, "And thou shalt make a plate of pure gold, and grave upon it like the engravings of a signet. Holiness to the Lord." Holiness to the Lord. Aaron's priestly garments, the high priest of Israel, there was an outward indication of who he was. When the children of Israel saw Aaron, the very first thing that they recognized in his garments was this signet on his mitre that was engraven in gold, bold, very bold, and it said, "Holiness unto the Lord." The royal priesthood, that's who we claim to be. That's who we are. So as a part of this royal priesthood, just like Aaron, the world will see something engraven on our very characters, our outward deportment, that says, "Holiness unto the Lord." Matt Parris spoke this morning about John the Baptist. John wasn't trying to straddle the fence in his appearance. He was not trying to just get by with a technical Adventist justification for doing certain things. He wanted to be far from the fence that separated God's people from the world. holiness unto the Lord. In 1 Peter chapter 2:9, we said that we are this chosen generation, this royal priesthood. This is who we are. This is who we claim to be. Now, with all of that said, and the Bible goes on to say that Aaron, the people were supposed to see this all the time. He was not to take this mitre off, as it were. This was who he was. It defined him as the high priest, and the people were to see it. Now, in addition to having this outward indication of who he was, Aaron had a message from the Lord for the people. He ministered. He was the go-between between the world and the Lord. That's who we are. Extreme times require extreme, extraordinary measures. So now, with that said, there are about 6 billion people on the earth, I understand, somewhere around there. And the last count, I understand, there are about 15 million or so of us. Now that 16 million, I could be wrong. I don't think it's gone over 20 million Adventists, at least not published. But if you take your church as a microcosm of the world church, your church, perhaps, if it's typical, let's say 50% of them are living truly according to the standards in some way. Well, let's say 80. Maybe you come from a really good church. 80% are really following the plan. And of that 80%, those that are truly ready to go all out for Jesus. And I'm not just talking about, in that 80%, there are those that perhaps, don't eat cheese or, don't smoke or maybe drink just a little coffee. I don't know how you define conservatism or liberalism anymore in these first world countries. But my point is this. If there's 16 million and 6 billion on the earth, the ratio is just incredibly disproportionate. And you may ask yourself, how in the world is this work going to finish? And I read somewhere that it talked about the rate at which we were, our church was baptizing new members. And it was very impressive when you look at it. I don't know how many new Adventists we get every minute or hour or something like that. But it's pretty impressive when you look at it until you look at how many people are being born on the earth. That's when you realize that, we are lagging behind tremendously. So the number of people that are being brought into the message versus the number of people that are being born, it is huge, a huge difference. We'll never catch up at the rate at which we're going. And one of the reasons is we are doing the same thing that we've always done, and we're getting similar results. Now is the time for extraordinary measures. God's people are going to have to stand up and say, here it is, Lord. I'm going all out. Take all of me. Use me however you can, because it's extraordinary time. The enemy and his forces are doing incredible things. Think about it. The enemy and his demons are using people in ways that they've never been used before. They're killing one another at extraordinary rates. Where I'm at in Guyana, spiritualism is at an all-time high in Guyana. And for those of you, some of you may have parents from the Caribbean, so you'll be familiar with it. But in West Africa, and we're going to talk a bit more about this, but in West Africa, Obia came through the Caribbean, through Haiti. And Obia is this spiritualistic, sort of religious, mixed up thing where the people put hexes on one another and curses and these things, and it's happening. I've dealt with so many cases of voodoo down there, and even students, and I'm talking about within the church. Now, I'm not talking about, these we have some church members that are following these, going to the Obia man when things go wrong. So that the enemy is doing all sorts of things, but God's people are still following the same old traditional, well, let's be careful, let's take it easy, Don't be too dramatic. You don't be fanatical. Don't be extreme. But the enemy is way extreme. I heard a speaker say, he was explaining, I really love the way he put it. I teach math, and my background's electrical engineering. I know we heard a lot of math today, so I'm not going to get into all of that stuff. But there's sort of this bell-shaped curve, in the church, and when it comes to issues. And the bell-shaped curve, when I'm doing grades, I curve the grades for the kids and all that kind of stuff, and grades aren't that important. But you're going to have a small group that will do extremely well, and then you're going to have a small group that will do poorly. But the vast majority of the people typically will be in between. And that normally works out statistically for most things. You have this bell shape. You have two extremes, and then the vast majority will be in the middle. When, let's say, this group is a church, and I don't know, 15 or so of you in here, and let's say a couple of you have this incredible idea. You say, you know what, church, let's just put it all on the line. We believe that Jesus is about to come. We believe that now is the time to get serious about this thing. Now is the time to just let it all go. Now, if we take 15, maybe 2 or 3 of you, let's say, is at that extreme, as we might call it. They're ready to fire up the entire congregation. We're about to do it. We're going to sell homes and land. We're just going all out. There will be, according to the normal curve, there are going to be about 2 or 3 that say, no, you are absolutely out of your mind. Not only that, you're fanatical. This brother came and talked to you. We need to get him checked out. We need to call the conference or whatever. See, this guy you have lost it. So there'll be a couple of folk who are directly opposed to moving God's work forward. Now, typically in our environments, the folk who are opposed are typically much more vocal than the other group. And you see it in smaller cases, church boards or whatever it might be. Hey, let's go out and do some Bible studies. We can't do that. We have, and you have some folk, these are folk directly opposed, that's being used by the enemy to stop God's work. That group is not the problem. That group is not the problem. That group that's screaming and shouting. The problem is that huge group in the middle that will not commit to anything. That's the problem, because what happens is the group that speaks the loudest typically sways that middle group. So the folk who are out here ready to do God's work are left hanging. And when it comes to a vote, because the group that says no, they have tons of reasons why we shouldn't. And that's the easiest thing. Let me tell you, it's the easiest thing in the world to figure out reasons why you shouldn't do anything. Really, really easy. It doesn't take very much courage or anything to shoot holes in somebody's plan or idea or God-inspired vision. But that middle group is the group that is really causing the issues. Now, I love my church. I love it. I mean, where else could we go from here? Where do you go from here? You going to be a Catholic? No. You going to go be a Pentecostal? No. This is it. There's nothing else coming from here. But there is an issue with our people. We're not prepared, or we're not willing to put everything on the line for the Lord. And there are lots of reasons for it. We've gotten comfortable, and you know them all, and we're going to identify a few of those and see how we could detach ourselves from it. Now, let me just be up front with you. I'm here recruiting. All right? My idea is to get some folk fired up about missions. And the first response I normally get when I'm in North America speaking is, but Brother Warren, there's a mission right in my neighborhood. There's a mission right here near me, you know. There's a mission in North England Conference, and sure, certainly there is. And how do you argue against that? My question would be, for those that tell me, oh, there's a mission right in my neighborhood, my response is, well, are you fulfilling that mission? Are you going door to door every day in your neighborhood, knocking on, are you doing Bible studies with your neighbors? All day? Are you a full-time Bible worker in the church? So to identify that there's a need and not to fulfill it is in a sense hypocrisy. So what I'm talking about is not the typical, and there's something to be said about that. I'm talking about, as was given the title, extreme missions. I'm talking about going to do something that the average person cannot do. For those of us, just by a show of hands, how many have been in the faith, a baptized member, for more than a year? Everybody? 2, 3, 5, 10. Oh my. Okay, well, this is the group. Y'all have heard all of this stuff before. Y'all are ready to go. 10 years of hearing this message, 10 years of reading Clifford Goldstein's Sabbath School quarterlies, and they start, after 10 years, they start to come back around again. And the poor pastors are struggling, trying to put a new spin on the thing, and then Review and Herald trying to put new covers on the book so you can try and read them again. So instead of Desire of Ages, blue, now it's pink and green, just to try and wake you up. So the poor folk are just trying to inspire all of us that have been sitting on this message for so, it's time to get busy. You've heard it enough. Now it's time for action. You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood. So in addition to having this mitre on your head that says holiness unto the Lord, being a part of this chosen generation means that we have been privileged with the understanding of Daniel 2, and Daniel 7, and Daniel 8. We understand how this thing is going to end. We know the message, as Peter's going to talk about the three angels' message. We understand that judgment has started, that we are to be preparing and delivering this message that Babylon is no longer valid for God's people. It's time to come out of Babylon. And if by chance you choose not to come out of Babylon, then you will have to contend with those last plagues. That's what it means to be a part of this chosen generation. God chose us to deliver that message to the world, certainly into North England Conference around this country. But there are people in lands that do not have the opportunity to know. I was we flew into a village about 2 weeks ago. And the only way you could get there is by single-engine plane, and there's several of those, as on a very narrow airstrip, or a very short airstrip. But there's no Adventist presence there. And we went there to negotiate some land with the village council and the captain. These are Amerindians. They're the indigenous people of Guyana. And as we were talking and communicating, they wanted a school there, and we agreed to build a school. We don't know how we're going to do it, but we have 20 acres for 40 years. And right before I left, two of the staff from my school in Kimview went there with basically machetes and a chainsaw to start clearing the land for a school. Now, the point is, in that village where there's no Adventist presence and there's no secondary school, and for generations the folk have had a very primitive primary education, now that there's going to be a secondary school there, and I'm talking about an Adventist school, and not just a secular school that happens to have a Bible class and put a Bible with smoke on the sign. No, I'm talking about a school that's going to go deep into the message, a school that's going to provide a means for these young folk to become a part of God's family. Now, there are not a lot of people that can do that. There are not a lot of folk who can go into some of these areas and make tremendous sacrifices for these folk to hear the gospel. But I would submit that there are several folk who could pass out tracts in your neighborhood. There are several folk who can do some Bible studies as a part of a huge group in North England. Now, Pastor Hush might contend with me, but he already gave me permission to recruit. So he said I could, whomever wants to can come. But the point that I'm making is this group that's here, and there are others, and it's happening all around the world, somebody is going to have to step up and say, "Here am I, Lord, send me." Somebody's going to have the courage to say, "Lord, I don't know how I'm going to make it. I don't know how you're going to take care of me. I'm not sure if I am equipped to do certain things, but I am willing to go all out for you." And what God is going to do, as he did with my case, he's going to backfill. So all the things that you have going on, all of the stuff that you're involved with, the Lord's going to bring in folk to take care of that. But what the church and what God needs now is somebody with extreme courage, with extreme faith, with this willingness to go all out. Now, again, it's not necessarily going into the deep recesses of the jungle. It could be Cambodia, it could be Africa, it could be... But the point is to go where the message have not been accessible for folk. Because we're talking about finishing the work. That's what this is all about. Okay, now, questions? We've got about 20 minutes. Questions before? No comments, no nothing. Okay, well, I'm going to pause, because if you're going to make me talk the whole time. Yes?
What skills would you require?
What skills? What?
Yeah, if someone was doing, what skills are in demand of the Lord? Besides the willingness to...
You took the... that is it. I know it sounds really, I don't know, general, but that willingness is the thing. Now, boy, if I had someone that was willing and was a carpenter, was a builder, or a mechanic, or a teacher, or a nurse, or all of those things. We have 4 schools, and I'm jumping a bit, so don't worry. We have 4 schools, 2 airplanes, a couple pilots. We're constructing schools. We're doing Bible work. There's tons of medical work. If there was a dentist or someone who wasn't, I'm not afraid of blood, but I get queasy when I see it. So my wife is into that. So if there was someone, so those are. There's a long list of skills and attributes of a person that can contribute. But the beauty of it is, and I really mean this, and I'm not just saying it, the beauty of it is the work is so vast and it varies so much that I know for sure that there's something that you can contribute. I mean, we cook on the one campus, we have about 70 people, and we're cooking with firewood, huge kettles like this. Now, you can cook. I get my turn in there too. I have my week that I have to go in there and cook with the students. And but in addition, last week or 2 weeks ago, we were pouring sidewalks, doing cement work. We started a school a year ago, and we had to go there to construct a staff house. And now, none of us were general contractors, but years ago, after doing it a couple of times, you go out into the bush with the chainsaw, and you start ripping wood and you start carrying it out, you know, a strong shoulder for the ladies. There's in this one village that we'll see called Siparuta, where we put up a school about a year ago, probably about 80 or 90 little adventurer age children. The church is, you know, it is almost outdoors, and we just started constructing a church building there. So it's broad, it's varied, and we'll get into. I'll show we got some slides and DVDs that I'm going to give all of you guys the DVDs so you could watch it. But it's broad. But again, the willingness is, and the reason I say that is because we've had some very skilled people who have come that were not committed. And Judas was an outstanding accountant, from what I understand. You know, the disciples thought he was well equipped. He had the skills to fit that position. And we know, you know, the story there. So I will tell you that a willingness, but if you're talking specifics, teaching, building, agriculture. That's farming is huge. Yes.
Well, my background is accountancy.
Uh-huh.
I want to do mission, but a lot of mission focus on like healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, I am a finance person.
Mm-hmm.
Where would I fit in all of this?
Well, okay, well, let me come back to this, because now we're getting to the meat. I thought I would have to take longer to get to this stuff. I could skip the presentation. You guys are going to talk about the real stuff. Okay, in accounting, well, not that we have a huge treasury, so you won't have, you know, much to balance, is, you know, 0 and 0. But what typically for accounting, I think it would go more into project management, the coordination of the different projects. Right now, my wife manages the administrative parts of, you know, hey, we have 15 staff. The local staff we give a little stipend to. Basically, it's about $20 to $25 a month U.S. That's what they live off. And if we have Bible workers in the field, the indigenous folk, where we are flying out flour, rice, and beans to them every month to do Bible work in some of these very remote areas. So trying to balance, how do we manage the pool of resources that we have, and I'm talking more human resources. God always provides. In 10 years or so, we've never missed a meal. But the point is, from an administrative point of view, you could develop a plan that says we have 25 Bible workers, and we're receiving, I don't know, to sustain those folk is going to take $500 a month and 10 bags of rice, and it's 20 gallons of fuel in a single engine plane. You know, so that's more of the what I see. You know, and it's a need that we have, and we're also busy because, you know, my wife can't get to it because she's teaching 6 classes, and you know, so we just kind of haphazard. So there is a need. There's a need. Now, what we're saying is, yes, is if you come as an accountant, you will also stir the pot and plant the seed, and because we do all of that. So as soon as I get back, I'm flying right in because I have to go and dig some trenches because we're putting in some pipes to pump up water from the river, and that's my job, and they're not letting me off. So so we do, you know, all of those things. But there is we have to be sensible in terms of skills and backgrounds and gifts and those sorts of things. Yes, sir.
Would you advise someone my age to just go there and do something, or would you advise me to stay here and study aviation?
What's your age?
I'm 19 years old.
19. That's always a tough one. Okay, well, my advice would be to gain experience in the field. What I've done over the years, because I went to college, it was before, you know, I knew any better, but there's so many young people who go to college and spend 4 years and then figure out, oh man, why did I do this? Or what am I going to do now? Those that come into the mission field, what I suggest is at least a year, and go to all of these various places. And if by chance you say you want to be an aviation mission pilot, and you get in this single engine plane and you see these mountains and all of this kind of stuff, and you get sick, and you wouldn't want to pay all this money for your commercial pilot's license and realize later that that's not what you really want to do. So I would suggest that you go into the field and get these different experiences and see at least what you will find out is what you don't want to do. We have a young lady from the States now. She's down there, and she said, Brother Warren, I'm glad I'm here, because what I realize is that I don't want to teach. She thought she did. Said, I do not want to be a teacher. And she realized she preferred the medical mission stuff. So she's doing the hydrotherapy and the charcoal and that kind of stuff. So at least you may find out what you don't want to do. So that was my advice. My 17-year-old daughter, who we took her to the mission field. She was 9 or so, and she's gone to several different countries, and she finished school early, and she spent a year in Venezuela. She said, I want to go learn Spanish, and she wanted to do the medical mission stuff. And I said, well, since Daddy is no longer in corporate America, you will not be going to Southern or Loma Linda for $100,000 a year, so here you go. So she went there, and she realized that, okay, she wants to continue in Spanish, and do the medical work. So then she decided she's going to go to Argentina. So she's in nursing in Argentina now, and Spanish speaking, and so she knows what she wants to do. Now my son, he's 14, and we're still praying for him. So we're going to figure that out. Okay. All right. Yes.
I've got a couple of questions, but firstly, what inspired you, or how did you make the big jump from working at Johnson to coming to doing this missionary work? It's quite a big jump.
Okay. So y'all made me spend all this time with this presentation, all structured, and now I'm just jumping all over. Okay. I'm going to do that in 1 second. I'm going to read this quote, and then we're going to do that. What's your next question?
The second one would be, what would you see as the steps that you took?
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. Let me do this, and then I'll go to the yes.
Just one question. If you give general advice, it's not also more of a personal calling. That, not all 19-year-olds are supposed to first go and.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe some advice on how to establish at what stage of your life, where are you at now, what's your calling?
Well, if you know your calling, I'm assuming your question is, let's say a bunch of 19-year-olds get this video and they all, want to pack up. What do you say? No, there must be inspiration involved. Perhaps all 19-year-olds should not come to Guyana. But what I do know is that all 19-year-olds should be prepared to put their all on the line for Jesus. That's what I'm talking about. That we're talking about 100% commitment and sacrifice. Now, for me, in my experience, we've had 15-year-olds. We had about 5 years ago 3 siblings. One was 14, one was 15, and one was 17. And we got a call from a parent, and we didn't even know the lady, and said, yes, next week my children are going to be in Kimbia. And we said, what do you mean your children are coming to Kimbia? Yes, we heard about what you guys were doing, and I think this will be great for my 3 children to come to Guyana for a year. And we're like, whoa, miss, what? And these 3 young people, Justina and John and their sister Kristen, came to Guyana for a year. They were 15, 16, and we didn't know how to deal with them. Are they students, staff? But what we did respect was that they were willing, and the mother was willing to give them a mission experience. And she was prepared to sort of technically halt their formal education. Now, what they learned in Guyana was something far greater than what they would have learned in their normal high school. So Justina went on to India to work with Lois Doyle doing delivering babies in parts of India. Kristen is in Norway, the Bible school they're teaching. But their experience was what brought them to that place. So I definitely strongly encourage, especially 19-year-olds who are at this bizarre decision point, whether to be financial analyst or missionaries, because these decisions now, they pretty much direct the rest of your life, because you choose to go to Loma Linda or whatever. And oh boy, I need to be careful. I'm not talking about Loma Linda, but I've gotten several emails from folk who want to be missionaries, but now they can't because they're straddled with $100,000 in school loans. I just graduated. I'm a physical therapist, but when I pay off this $100,000 school loan bill, then I'll be a missionary. So my advice would be to go and see what's happening first, and then tailor your training. Then you can go back with a purpose. But Danella, for instance, some of you may know Danella and Charlotte. They came for a year, and they had a debate. Should I go to university or well, when they came, they realized that, hey, this is the direction I want to go based on what God exposed me to. So now their purpose for going to university is much more appropriate to the times in which we're living. I'm going to get this education so I could contribute to God's work, not so that I can be comfortable or successful. So if you already have that vision, if you know what God has called you to do and you need to get the training, if you know God has called you to be an aviation pilot or mission pilot or whatever, then that's resolved and you're convinced of it, then go get your training. That there's no need. But if you're not sure, then okay, I'm just going to, I have 5 minutes for this session. I want to go through this, and then I think I'm going to answer your question. You're going to rotate, huh? You're not going to hear it. Okay, let me go through this, and then I'm going to answer that question. The work of God is to become, this is a quotation from Testimonies, the work of God is to become more extensive, and if his people follow his counsel, there will not be much means in their possession to be consumed in the final conflagration. All will have laid up their treasure where moth and rust cannot corrupt, and the heart will not have a cord to bind it to earth. This is part of the issue. It's not necessarily, is there work for me? Is there something for me to do? God's people are entangled in this demonic web that the enemy have put together, and we're not really sure on how to detach ourselves from the things of the world. So, education, we've been duped in a large degree as to what true education is all about and what we're supposed to be doing in these final days. So we're in this bad situation, and the prophet talked about it. Houses and lands will be of no use to the saints in the time of trouble, for they will have to flee before infuriating mobs, and at that time their possessions cannot be disposed of to advance the cause of present truth. The time is coming. I was reading on the airplane over here that the average American in the last few months have lost 18% of their wealth. Now, our church is we have some wealthy members in our church. And my thought was, if God's people also are part of this number that I read, so if God's people lost 18% of their wealth, and I would assume some of it has to come from mortgage or housing costs dropping or the value of their houses, but I'm sure a large part of that had to have come from investments that were lost in the stock market or wherever they may have been. So 18% of the wealth of, let's say, God's people, and I'm not sure, that could have been used to further his cause. I think that's significant. And finally, I was shown that it is the will of God that the saints should cut loose from every encumbrance before the time of trouble comes and make a covenant with God through sacrifice. Now is the time. We don't have much time remaining. The young lady's question is, how did I come to the place? I'm going to 3 minutes. Oh, okay, all right, good. The clock's. I worked in out of college. My degree is in electrical engineering, and I went to work in research at Caterpillar in Illinois. And the way I got into electrical engineering, I was fairly good in math in high school. And every year they publish what are the highest paying careers or degrees. And I basically went, I said, this one was up there, electrical engineering, and I was accepted into engineering school. And I said, okay, well, this is what I would do. I had no love for engineering. I was not one of those kids that took apart toasters and, just dreamed about being an engineer. I was very practical. You make more money doing this, and I could do it. So that's what I did. And what I realized after a couple years, I had a guy from MIT and a guy from Yale, whatever, sitting next to me, and these guys were very good. They'll sit in front of these terminals and design circuits for hours, and it was driving me crazy. I said, I cannot do that. I need to be with people. And these guys hated interacting with people. So they would send me, hey, why don't you go to the staff meetings, you go to deal with those nuts over in accounting, and all we want to do is crank out more patents. And I say, you know what, guys, y'all are much better at this than I am, and I prefer being with the folk. So after a couple years, I got out of engineering and went into management, the manufacturing side, where we were dealing with factories, and then I got into purchasing and mergers and acquisitions and starting new facilities. And I spent a lot of my time in England at the facility in Leicester. I used to come back and forth here twice a month at the Caterpillar facility there. So just moving. Now at this time, even though I was introduced to the faith at 17, at this particular point in time, that was nowhere in my thinking. I would stroll into church, whenever I wasn't traveling somewhere around doing business, and make an appearance, and things were going well financially. We had acquired a lot, and professionally, I was doing extremely well. And I moved from Caterpillar and went to work in automotive and Johnson Controls, and managed a huge supplier development, couple $1 billion in spend with suppliers, and still doing well. And one day, on my way home, I was coming back from Germany, and I arrived at the airport in North Carolina, and it was snowing, and tried to start my car, and just so happens it was a very nice Porsche, and that thing would not start. And I said, what in the world is happening here? All the money I paid for this thing, and this won't start. And kept trying to start it, and finally it started, and I got home. My family was in Atlanta at the time. And then the very next morning, I got into the garage to start the car, and it still wouldn't start, and I kept trying, and boom, huge explosion happened. Apparently one of the gas lines had broken, and a fireball came through the firewall on the car's, the passenger side, and I was able to get out. And this time I just didn't strap myself in, and got out of the car and got outside the house, and I watched the car explode and the house and everything go up in flames right there. And one of the firemen dislocated his shoulder because one of the shocks of the car projectiled and hit him in the shoulder. And I watched this thing happen. And now my mother, this was 7 years after I had joined the church, and my mother had been praying for 7 years. And what happened, every time I'd call from Zurich, Mom, I just got a promotion and I'm doing this. And she wasn't impressed. Her answer was, what have you done for Jesus? And she just rained on my parade. And then I'd do something else that I thought was incredible. And Mom, so then when this thing happened, I said, Mom, the car blew up. I'm fine, but we lost everything. Boy, the Lord is talking to you. Oh, Mom, it's just, insurance paid for everything. And so I was fine. But 3 weeks later, we were in a corporate apartment, and I was in that apartment. And I tell you, just as clear as we're talking here, I don't know if it was the angel or God himself, said, Satan tried to kill you. And had he succeeded, your soul would have burned in hell. You were not prepared for the second coming of Christ. And the very next Sabbath, I was the first one in church in the parking lot. Nobody was there. Now, for 7 years, I was strolling in and out of the church. As if and at this time, the elders and the pastor, we were playing golf. I was at members of country club and all that, and they were sort of living vicariously through me. So for 7 years, not a word about my salvation, not a word about whether or not I was living up to the standard, because I was not. I should have been disfellowshipped. I was not representing the faith or God at all. But this particular Sabbath, I was there 8 o'clock in the parking lot, waiting, and Sister Iris Ray came. I remember she was the Sabbath school superintendent about 15 years ago. Okay, time up. That means I have to finish this testimony. And she said, will you have prayer for us for Sabbath school? And I hadn't done that in years, and I prayed, and every song said, I was bawling like a baby that Sabbath. It seems every hymn hit me so hard. And I was crying and crying and crying. Nobody could understand it. They'd figure, oh, he was some post-traumatic something about the fire and all that. But Jesus had done something to me. And I went and bought a Bible, and I read for almost 36 hours straight. And it changed my life. But it wasn't until 2 years after that, and I kept asking the Lord, what is it that you want me to do? What is it that you want me to do? For 2 years, I remained in corporate America for 2 years with this fire in me, getting frustrated with Jesus. Lord, why in the world do you still have me in the midst of this thing? Even though I was doing Bible studies, my secretary was Jewish, I'm doing Bible studies with her. When I was in Zurich, I was on the phone 2 o'clock in the morning. I had about 30 Bible studies going in a week, and still on his job. And I'm saying, Lord, why am I here? This is not making sense. I've committed everything to you. I clean up the church. I'm trying to make restitutions for all these. I'm trying to do everything for all of this time I wasted. Still, he has me in here. And when you come back, I'll tell you what happened. All right, good.